Welcome, everyone. My name is Felipe once again. I am here with the Charter for Compassion in our Global Read webinar series with two awesome guests. So let me just introduce you to both of them. Today, our Global Read is in the book, Why Peace and Prayers Are Not Enough. And this book was written by Reverend Julie Brenton-Rowe, who is here with us. Thank you so much for joining us. And the conversation will be moderated by Reverend Helmke, who is part of the Board of Trustees of the Charter for Compassion. Welcome you both. Thank you for taking the time to be here with us. And the floor is yours to begin this conversation.
Thanks, Felipe. That's so wonderful, and we're so excited.
On the 12th floor of Rio Tower. I repeat, we'll be testing the fire alarm system on the 12th floor of the Rio Tower.
So this is part of Julie's introduction. Julie today serves as a hospital chaplain here in San Antonio, and we've been friends and colleagues probably for a couple decades now. And she is a part of Compassionate San Antonio. As I said, she's living here in San Antonio, but she has had the rare opportunity, which you're going to be hearing about and you read about in the book if you had a chance to read it, to spend 4 years in Jerusalem with the Evangelical Lutheran Church there and its bishop. So she's going to be telling more about that. Julie and I both serve in the same kind of branch of Lutheranism. Obviously, they're the folks who ordain women. And so that's what it allows us to do the work that we've been doing in that direction in terms of faith and people of faith. And the work that we do together is very interfaith as well as ecumenical. So, and in fact, whether you believe or not, we keep working together for compassion. So it's my honor today to introduce my dear friend and colleague and a part of Compassionate San Antonio, Julie Rowe. Jules, you mentioned to me earlier that you wanted to start our time together with a poem, Where Was the Holy in the Holy Land? So I want to ask everybody maybe to take a deep breath. This is Julie Rowe's very first book read as an author. So she's excited, and we all know what that means, but we're going to take a deep breath together, and we're going to hold her through this whole thing because we can't wait to hear more. So Julie, share with us your poem.
Oh, thank you, Anne. And thank you all for being here, and Charter for Compassion, thank you very much for having me. So this is wrestling with the question I get a lot. What is holy about the Holy Land? So this is my wonderings and thoughts about that when I left. Where was the holy? Did I touch it? Was it here? Was it chased out by the bombing, by the bullets, fear? If we chased out all these people, would the holiness come back? What's the sound of one God loving if there's no one loving back? I came to see and touch and smell these holy shrines and places, but most holy to me is the one who comes for simple human faces. The holy is not just something far beyond or high above. God's holiness is in the world where people find the courage to love. To accompany, to walk beside is to tread on sacred ground. A holy quest, one truly blessed, the most holy land I've found. And that's really what I did there, was I accompanied people. I started my work in Palestine, was in Ramallah as an ecumenical accompanier with the Ecumenical Accompaniment Program in Palestine and Israel. That's a big thing to say. And we were there to be a compassionate presence and to witness what was really happening there on the ground. And so to walk beside peace builders and see what was fueling the violence. This was in 2003. In the Second Intifada, the uprising against occupation, and it was a violent time. And so I was there, and we were there to hopefully be a peaceful presence in the midst. And my team worked in a refugee camp, and we networked with women peace builders in Ramallah. These were wonderful, brave people.
And what experience, because it also kind of led you forward and brings us here today. You know, the book title starts with why. So Jules, why this book? The why now seems pretty obvious to me, but how How did why peace and prayers are not enough come into being?
Well, I've watched a TED Talk by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie about the danger of a single story. And when I went to Palestine and Israel for the first time in 1991, all I knew was the single story. It was the traditional Israeli narrative based on the novel Exodus that most people my age know. And of course, the story of the Jewish people, fleeing from all the horrible violence of the pogroms and eventually the Holocaust, needed a place to be safe. In this narrative, they were a people without a land in an area that was a land without a people. And in this, they told me it would be silent in here.
Code red, level 12.
Okay,
It's okay, Julie.
so the Arabs in this thing were
Code
violent,
red, level
savage people. Can you hear me?
Mhm.
Violent, savage people, and all they wanted to do was murder Jews.
code
So
red, level 12.
all I knew about Palestine,
It's
all I
okay.
knew about Palestine was Arafat and him
Code
blowing up planes
level 12.
and the Olympics in Germany. So when I went there, I met
Code red,
people,
level 12.
amazing people, who showed me different stories and a harsh reality that conflicted with that single story.
Red, level 12.
There were things happening there that needed to be told. Key causes of the violence. And the people implored me,
Code
and all of the
red,
internationals
level
that came
12.
with me, to tell their stories, because they felt like their voices were not heard. They were usually dismissed.
Code red, level
So then I
12.
came back to the US and I told people these stories. Many did not believe me.
Code
All they
red,
knew was the
level
single
12.
story that I had known, that I knew until I lived there. I'm doing a doctorate in public theology,
Code red,
and for a
level
prophetic
12.
communication class, I compiled photos, stories, and
Red, level 12.
pictures that I had taken. And I put that together for this class, and they showed my growing awareness of what was happening there.
Red,
I
level
turned it
12.
in and I put it in a drawer. Then October 7th happened. I was sick at the brutal carnage that had
Red,
happened in that
level
day,
12.
at the savageness of it all. I knew what was going to happen in
Red,
Gaza, the
level 12.
devastation that was going to happen, because I'd walked through the rubble in Gaza of bombings in 2002 and 2003,
Code
and I
red,
watched
level
it happen again and again. There was a poem floating out in Facebook in October,
level 12.
and it was Langston Hughes' Harlem. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the
red,
sun,
level 12.
or fester like a sore? Does it stink like rotten meat,
Code
or
red,
crust and
level
sugar
12.
over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode?
Code red,
And I kept
level 12.
thinking, what do we expect when we put 2 million people, when 2 million lives are deferred?
Code red, level 12.
For 18 years of siege, the Gaza was under siege for 18 years, has been, and there's shortages of
Red,
electricity
level 12.
and food and jobs. They were not able to leave. We are a trauma-informed
Red,
care
level
culture.
12.
We know what it means when children have adverse childhood experiences,
Code
the effect
red,
on the
level 12.
future health and behavior. What would that mean for the 1 million plus children of Gaza who have known only such an
Red,
existence?
level 12.
All they have ever known know, being walled in and bombed like fish in a barrel.
Code
Does this excuse what
red,
Hamas
level
did?
12.
Nothing excuses that savage slaughter of anyone.
Code red,
And
level 12.
it is possible to both wholly condemn Hamas's horrible savageness and
Code
to
red,
understand
level 12.
that the brutal realities of Gaza would inevitably drive some over the edge and lead to violent explosions.
Code red, level 12.
We need to explore what would drive people to such madness, knowing the type of price they would pay if we just blindly
Code
condemn and
red,
go on with
level
things as
12.
they are. History will repeat itself, maybe even more violent than the next time. So I couldn't just sit there helplessly.
Level 12.
I had to add to that single story with my stories. And that's what this is. It's a scrapbook of photos.
Code red, level
I'm gonna
12.
go in I don't know where I can go. Is there anywhere I can go that isn't gonna have this?
Maybe another floor.
Code
Yeah, a couple of floors
red,
down.
level 12.
Other floors down. They told me it
Julie?
wasn't gonna be. Do you want me to go to another floor?
No, and Marilyn has
Code.
noted in
Level 12.
chat. I don't know how you're getting them to say code red over and over again during this conversation, because it
Red.
only highlights what's happening. It's like, we forget about it, right? It's on the other side of the planet, and it's at code red. And it hasn't just been at code red since October the 7th. It's been code red for years and decades. And so I already knew you had a direct line to the higher power, right? But I know, and aren't you glad that you prepared? I can only imagine. I know how hard it is anyway, but to then have that continually coming. So, no, don't move, stay there. I am asking, and I'm sure it's happening of those who are attending today, because I know I'm doing it, but I'm sending light and love and listening to you and opening up space. So consider that you're surrounded by a bubble of love from us and compassion. And
Thank you.
it's just the Holy at work, reminding all of us, we're at code red. So how did you even get there besides when being a companion and accompanier? But you were there then for 4 years. And
I was there.
yeah, and from just knowing you and then again reading the book, it was an extraordinary and rare experience. Can you tell us about how you got there for 4 years and worked there?
Yeah. So I went first in 1991 with a seminary trip, and it just captivated me as that land and its people do. The people I met and the strange stories I heard, I wanted to go back and live someday. Then came December of 2002 and the second Intifada, the violence there, and I saw it on TV, the bombings and the rubble and the Israeli tanks going through the streets of Bethlehem and West Bank towns. And then the Peace Center, a man at the Peace Center said, I am getting a peace delegation to go over there in November. And I said, I'm going. And I did. It was a peace delegation for a Palestinian university president and an Israeli former director of the Shin Bet, their security service. They were campaigning together on a joint program to end occupation. And the things I saw, as I said, the destruction, the checkpoints, the fear, the military, the wall starting, it just started to get to me. And when I went home, I was raised very conservative, patriotic, and I love our country. I love the freedom, the
Code
liberty, the
red,
justice for
level
all.
12,
We were against Checkpoint Charlie, against the Berlin Wall, and for the little kids throwing stones against the tanks in Czechoslovakia. But this turned my world upside down. I learned that the United States was giving aid to the Israelis and funding people that were building walls and the checkpoints and the tanks. And I hadn't known much about the occupation, and I was pretty sure that if there were occupations, America would be against it. So my brain was turned upside down. So the next year I went to be an ecumenical accompanier in Ramallah. And when I was there, I met the Palestinian Lutheran Church, and the missionaries were there from my American church. And there was a communication position that was going to be open, and I took that. And so it was life-changing, as you said, Anne. I developed a website, resources, newsletters, telling the story of the faith and of the Palestinian Lutherans, but also Christians, Muslims, and Israeli peace builders who were working together for a just peace. And I also helped Bishop Younan write his sermons and statements and articles and lead delegations. But it was really fun because I could write statements and then quote myself in the publicity. It was fun. So that's how I got there.
Yeah, you brought some pictures, didn't you? Some photos? Show us, tell us about them.
I did. Can you find the American pastor in that picture?
Did you decide to wear red just so you could stand out? Was that it?
I wasn't even thinking about it, but I called these days when we visited one another in a formal delegation of there's 12 heads of churches. And so we would go, and I called them my days, the boys in black. Maybe I subconsciously wore red. So the next one is one of my favorite stories. This is Saliba, and one of our Lutheran pastors was going to be ordained in Jerusalem, but he was from Beit Sapur, and so his family, they needed permits to go from the Bethlehem area to Jerusalem, which is only 6 miles away. And so they gave the grandfather a permit and not the grandmother. And so I gave her a ride across the checkpoint. We put her in the church van in the middle of all of these internationals, put her in the middle. And as I went through the checkpoint, I just waved because I knew they usually don't stop white people. So I just waved and got through. And when I did, and I looked in the rearview mirror, looked back, and I saw her, and she was crying because they hadn't let her go to Jerusalem in 20 years. So it was amazing. Next photos are from my least favorite memories, home demolitions. So the Israelis have a policy that the Palestinians need Israeli permits to build even in their part of Jerusalem, their East Jerusalem. But they don't give them. They require permits, but they only give like 3 or 4% of those that are applied for. And when the families grow and they build them, they get demolition orders, and they can be acted on the next day or never. You never know until they show up at 7 in the morning with the bulldozers at your house. And so I was on an Israeli committee against the home demolitions alert, and we would get a text, home demolition in Beit Sahur or Beit Hanina, and we would go and try and gather and stop the demolition, which would work sometimes. And they often would just come back the next day. And then they charged the Palestinians for the demolition,
Red,
which is
level 12.
interesting. But this little girl in her puppy slippers, and she had her cat on the porch. She was just
Code,
caught my heart.
red,
And this
level
is her
12.
after the demolition. And I always wondered what happened to her cat. Anyway, this other one with the flag is a different kind. This was a
Code,
man who
red,
had
level 12.
a man who had been accused of committing violence against Israelis. And so what they do is they come and get him, and then they demolish the house. And so this is the grandma of the house looking through the rubble, trying to find things. And I said to the man next to me who spoke English, I said, what is that flag? This was very early on. What is that flag? And he said, that's the Hamas flag. This is the best recruiting place for Hamas, which I can understand. And the next photos, I think, is Jamila. This young woman is from refugee camp
Red,
where I
level
worked
12.
with a media project. We had them take pictures of their life and what they would want American kids to know about their lives. And we talked to them about their lives, and she told a story about in the refugee camp, they would come in and take the young shabab, they called them, the young boys, you know, like young teenage years. They'd come in the middle of the night and take them. They didn't really know where, they could suppose, but they didn't have to tell them where they were taking them. And they didn't have to have any reason for taking them. And they would take them away, and you don't know for how long. There's something called administrative detention, and they can come and get you in the middle of the night or whenever, and they don't have to have a reason or an evidence or any charge. And that could go on for 6 months, and they can renew it for another 6 months. So, for example, there's 10,000 prisoners now in Palestine, and at least 3,000 or 4,000 are administrative detainees without any charge. I think it's more. But anyway, so she would talk about that, and she thought it was
Code,
funny
red,
because they
level
would
12.
bet who was going to be the next boy, but it wasn't funny to me. And I remember her face telling me
Code,
that.
red, level 12.
It makes me think too, Julie, about even the courage for them to be talking to you, and those actions of the heart, and your own courage there and then, but also now. I'm sure all of us have, at least at some point, if not still, know that this particular conversation is not an easy one to have with friends or colleagues, or it just can be difficult. And so I want to thank you for your courage and putting that compassion into action by telling us these stories. What do you think about, though, today? I mean, your book talks about your encounters then, but what do you think about on this day when it comes to things in the Holy Land?
Yeah, I have a picture
Code,
in my
red,
mind
level 12.
of that. You know, in Israel, they have that long table. It was a Shabbat table, I think, with empty chairs.
Code, red,
And they are,
level 12.
you know, they're waiting for their loved ones to come home. And there's, of course, hostages still over there. And I think about all of the people that they're waiting to see again and that they won't see. And I think about that song from Les Miserables, empty chairs and empty
Red,
tables.
level 12.
I don't know if you remember that. There's a grief that can't be spoken. There's a pain goes
Code,
on and on.
Red, level 12.
Empty chairs at empty tables. Now my friends are dead and gone. Phantom faces at the window, phantom
red,
shadows
level
on the
12.
floor. Empty chairs at empty tables where my friends will meet no more. Oh, my God, don't ask me what your sacrifice was for. Empty chairs, empty tables, where my friends will sing no more. And I think about, of course, I think about Gaza. And I imagine what it must be like to be in there. And I can't imagine that, but I did write a poem about it. I think it must feel. Is there anybody out there? Is anybody home? While you go about your business, we are dying here alone. What Hamas did was a horror, unconscionable and vile. Is it any less repugnant when children are defiled? You don't see the children running from the bombings and the noise. You can't know what it is like to see your homeland all destroyed. All these young ones know is warring in a prison opened air. 2 million trapped in terror, fear, and hopelessness, despair. As our buildings fall around us, is there still a world out there? When we're all cleaned out completely, will anybody care? And the answer is no, from the people in power that have the power to stop it. 90% of Gaza displaced, 40,000 people killed, mass graves, starvation, Israeli hostages still out there. We could stop this. We should be ashamed of ourselves as a world and as a country.
I don't know, Jules, how you sleep at night. I don't know how any of us sleep at night. Other than the fact that we're not seeing it directly, right? So somehow or other in our, we're able to block that out. But things are happening today. I remember asking in the early 2000s, about the Holy Land. Can it get any worse, right? And it has, and it was unfathomable, even in the early 2000s, that it could get any worse, and it has. So where do you see any hope? What gives you hopes? What could and should be happening? And, call us into action. What is that?
Well, what gives me hope is the young people. They're just amazing. I don't know, Felipe, if you could put up the picture of him. Yes, that was one of my favorite things, was taking the kids, painting on the wall, and they're just wonderful. And they know that they're trying to build a better life. That one there in the light blue, she's my vote for the next prime minister of Palestine. They're just amazing. Our Lutheran schools, Muslims and Christians raised together. There are no Israelis because they're not allowed in the West Bank, in the heavily populated areas of Palestine. But these schools are amazing. They're democratic values, mutual understanding, women's rights. They're preparing the next generation of future leaders. And I think they're ready to take some leadership. Pastor Mitri Raheb is a favorite source of hope, founder and president of Dar al-Kalama University, the only arts and culture, media, Palestinian college or Arabic college in the country, I think, if not the region. I think of Pastor Sally Azar, who came from one of these schools. She is now the daughter of the bishop over there. And I knew her as a child growing up, and now she's the first ordained woman in Palestine. Wonderful. So then the women, it's the women that it's time for the women to take over this peace building process. They are the true peace builders. I remember Mahsom Watch is an Israeli organization, and they joke about them being the grandmothers and the conscience of the soldiers at the checkpoints, because they just watch them. And there's so many other groups making a difference. This is Women Wage Peace. And it's true. My favorite Israeli peace activist used to say, why do they give the peace process to generals and military? All they know how to do is fight. They should give the peace process to mothers. Mothers know how to negotiate with love. So I think about my bishop that I worked with, Bishop Munib Younan, he used to do interfaith things, and I remember working with him a little bit, trying to raise up the Amman message, which was imams and clerics from all over the world came, and it was after September 11th, and they gathered together and they said, violence, suicide bombings, all of this is not consistent with the Islamic faith. The Islamic faith is about peace. Let me just one other of the most profound organizations to me is the Bereaved Family Forum. And they are a group of Palestinians and Israelis, all different faiths, who have lost mostly its children, other family members, to the violence on both sides. And they've joined together and said nobody else should have to go through this. And they work together to end the occupation. They go and talk together, Palestinian, Israeli, to groups, to schools, and they talk about that because they think that that is violence that's fueling all the extremism. And so they work that, and it's amazing. Now, what should be done real quick, if I can? I don't know. First, could we ask the Palestinians? The world leaders come in and out and talk to Israelis and other Western countries. And we should talk to the people that live there that have no power, and they should have a say. They should have more than a say. We throw around the two-state solution as, desperately trying to jump to a solution. I think that's like rearranging on the Titanic. Until we avoid more icebergs and fix the hole in the ship, we won't solve anything. The problem is military occupation. The problem is the stealing of Palestinian land for settlements. Restricts the movement, the freedom, the human rights, the dignity of every aspect of life for Palestinians in the West Bank, which includes East Jerusalem and then Gaza too. Now, Netanyahu wants to destroy Hamas. I would like to sideline all of the extremists in all of the religions, because there's extremists on all sides, Christian, Muslim, and Jewish. The problem is on the Israeli side that the extremists are now in power in the government. And it's the government that people hate. It is the people I met. It's not Jewish as they're Jewish. And this is the mainstream that I talked with. There are extra to do, but most people that I deal with or dealt with, it's the Israeli government and their policies. So I just don't see how bombing and killing and demolishing homes and I just don't see how that all is going to kill the will of the people for freedom, to resist occupation and to gain their freedom. So until they stop taking 12-year-olds from the homes and parents in the middle of the night, until they stop taking Palestinian land to build Israeli settlements, until they can move and live without military invasions and imprisonment and checkpoints, the rage and the insistence and resistance won't stop. All sides need to come to the story, to come to the table, and all stories need to be heard, because that's how these things have to be resolved. So before we talk about one or states, let's just talk about this. We need to ensure basic human rights, basic human dignity, freedom, and security for all. We in America say, and we fought for, liberty and justice for all. And for us individually, learn more of the story, learn more than a single story. the real problem, in my view, of the single story is if the single story are the people in power, then you really don't hear the other stories. And that's what's happening here. And that's why I wrote this book.
You know what I appreciated so much about the book and what you've shared with us today. I took some spiritual activism training some years ago, but one of the profound statements that was made in that was that it's going to take both sides of our brain.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you weren't ready for that, right? Both sides of our brains. And so the art that you've shared with us, the poetry, the stories, but you've also have shared with us, strategies and things that aren't working, making those critical assessments. One of the initial steps, as all of us know, in compassion is awareness. And so I would even say to all of us, so we're aware, right? But now to, make others aware. What we did in San Antonio, we were asked by the mayor to open up like a community conversation. And of course, we were struggling with that. Like, how do we talk? Even in the midst of our friends that come from, right, how do we do that? And so we decided, let's read Julie's book and talk together. And at least that's helping us in San Antonio kind of move forward, practicing, using our mouth and our head and sharing that with others. So I just want to say, I think that's can be a solid first step to people is do a book read, find out about the new art project that's working throughout the charter as well. We're going to move into questions now. I noticed there are a couple in chat. One, Julie, are some schools still functioning in Gaza?
Oh, I don't think so. I think everybody's been out of school. I've heard that something like 80 or 90% of them are destroyed anyway. But I do think I saw a piece, or I saw where they're trying in little groups, I think, that like mothers, and I think that I've seen this. But I think mothers have tried to hold, for just a few children. I think they're trying to, but I don't know. And I know the universities, I want to say they're all destroyed, but if not, it's close.
And what a loss, right? Marilyn also asked about, the oasis of peace. Are there other groups you can point us to that reach for peace through hope? The Family Forum received one of the Charter's humanitarian awards. What are some of those groups that you can point us to?
So Women Waging Peace is another one that is, I think, pretty incredible. I did not interface with them that much, but I know of them. There are human rights groups. There's 2 Israeli human rights groups, and they're dedicated to lifting up what they see. That is Israeli Committee Against Home Demolitions, B'Tselem, and they go in and they look at what's happening. But there are schools, in Jerusalem that I know of that are Christian, Muslim, and Jewish people, and the kids learn mutual understanding. And there's Nevi Shalom over there is a community. Again, it's Elias Shakur's school. I don't know that I can remember it. Elias Shakur is a bishop of, I think it's the Melkite Christians. And he has a school. Remember him? He has a school up northern in Israel that also is Israeli.
Is that Father Elias Shakur? Is that who you're thinking of?
Yes.
He's amazing. He's amazing.
He is. And that's up in northern Israel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He does some great work. Let's see, in expressing sympathy for Palestinians, so often one can be labeled anti-Semitic. How would you suggest to respond to this?
I know. It can sound like you're anti-Semitic. What we're talking about though is Israeli policies. And that's different. It's a government, it's policies. It is not about being Jewish. In fact, the people that I found that were the most incensed about what was happening were Jewish rabbis that I worked with, because they said there's nothing about what's going on here that is according to our values. Our values are, and I'm not a Jewish rabbi, but what they would talk about is we're based in the Exodus, liberating people from oppression. And this is not who we are. We are those people who are working for justice for the prophets of old. They all called out injustice and they called for righteousness and peace.
I encourage everybody to look into chat because, so typical, right, of the Charter for Compassion, but Marilyn is putting in links there. So has Lynn, Women Waging for Peace. And there is a comment or a question in the Q&A. What hopes for a nonviolent movement to challenge the Israelis? The March for Return was largely ignored in the media, and the IDF shot at the marchers. There is the group Nonviolence International. What possibilities for nonviolent challenges to aggressive military policies?
The church I worked for, the Palestinian Christians, there's something called Kairos, and it's a statement from the Palestinian Christians, but they all advocate creative nonviolence, and just resistance, and this is something that gets some people call this economic terrorism, but the thing that moved South Africa was boycott, divestment, and sanctions, and it's now illegal in most, well, I don't know how many U.S. states to advocate for that. Like in Texas, you can't get a federal contract, if you advocate for boycott or sanctions or divestment. And that's a nonviolent tool. I hope for a new government. I hope for women and young people in government. Marwan Barghouti is the most popular leader ahead of Hamas and Fatah. He sits in an Israeli jail, and I don't know that much about. I think he's charged with murder from the second Intifada 20 years ago. I don't know the background, but I know that he has converted to nonviolence, and he's giving that kind of leadership from prison. And I don't know. Does he need to be let out of prison like Mandela did? I don't know, but I know that there's young people and women working on this kind of thing, and that's my hope.
I also have this, some could say crazy hope, that this kind of potential turn in history could help the whole planet, right? We really are seeing the mess of it, right? And that can be part of the healing process, to finally see the mess and be able to say, yep, it's a mess. And I really, but it's rough, right? It's a rough mess. So I think we might have time for one more question or even a comment. Marilyn's in chat just kind of begging us all to please listen to this. Post this, here's the prayer of the mothers. So please, everyone, make sure. Julie, I don't know if you'd be willing to, but if you are, maybe you could put into chat your email. If people have questions, or further down the road might want to contact you. I know that that might be a lot, but we both know this is how the world works.
Yeah,
best.
oh, here it is. I will tell
Yes.
you that I get so much spam. It's the 2003 is from the year 2003, so I have like 60,000. Yeah, anyway, I get a lot of emails, but I will look for any emails and respond.
Right. Marilyn also posted 77 notable peacemakers in Palestine and Israel.
Hmm.
That would be fun to look at our
Yes.
next book read that we've been doing on your book here in San Antonio. So I'm going to pin that idea because I want to look at that list. I bet
Yeah.
we know, I'm sure we know some of those people, right? All
Yeah.
right. Well, I know that you also have a poem that you wanted to close with.
Yeah.
Yeah, Marilyn's
So-
suggesting too that when you write, Julie, put Charter for Compassion in the subject line, and then Julie, you'll be able to search for those.
Excellent.
That would
Good
be
idea.
really helpful, right? So
Yes. Thank you.
your poem. Mhm.
So this poem, it's a Christian poem, but it talks about the birth of Jesus, which was a baby born into poverty and in the least place that you'd expect it, in Bethlehem. And the angels first announced it to the shepherds, the poor shepherds in the fields. And I wrote this poem in Advent, which was one of the most sacred times for me. It was ironic that the violence and the isolation of Bethlehem behind a wall, and then the advent of the child and peace on earth. But one Advent, I was riding into the old city on an old Palestinian bus with potholes. See their potholes. So it was bouncing around, and this little boy was clinging to the pole and to his biscuit. He was trying to eat his biscuit, and he just captivated me. And it's the eyes of the children that I still remember, the hope that's there, the innocence that's there, and that's what made me write this poem. It's called "To the Bright-Eyed Boy on the Bouncing Bus, Clinging to His Half-Eaten Biscuit." You don't know yet, do you? You don't know yet that this is not normal. These checkpoints and closures, permits and papers, detention and destruction. You haven't gotten the message yet. To the world, you are not quite human. Palestinian terrorist, gunman, militant. Worth less than. Hang on, bright-eyed boy. Hang on to your humanity like you hang on to that biscuit. And don't let anyone take it away from you. No soldier, no settler, no terrorist, nobody. No anger, no hatred, no fear, no injustice. For unto you is born this day a Savior. To you, for you first. First to the scared shepherd and the oppressed and occupied. Not first to the powerful politicians with privilege and pomp. And yet for them too, because they are human, even when they forget and when I condemn. To you, to me, to them, God born into humanity to live as one who believes that every child is beloved and has a place at the table. Hang on, little man, bring your friends and come to the manger. Ahlan wa sahlan, Arabic for you are most welcome here. We learn to live as if every child had a place at the table and we could get them there and feed them and treat them with equal human dignity and compassion. That's my hope. And that we learn the stories of all of the children. We owe it to them to change things and make it different. Thanks.
Thanks for you, Julie. Thanks for the book. Felipe, we hand it over to you. I understand you have some announcements and other things coming up.
Yes, thank you both for the time that you dedicated for all of us to listen to hear the stories. Thank you, Julie, for the experiences that you were able to share through this book and this conversation. The Charter for Compassion was founded on the principle of the Golden Rule: treat others as you want to be treated. And I think a very important necessary part of the Golden Rule is for us to put ourselves in somebody else's shoes. And in order for us to do that, we need to hear the stories. We need to understand different points of view and see where that comes from, so that we can actually, so we will be able to actually put ourselves in those shoes and understand more of that. So I think this global read really was successful in that part, that allowed us to put ourselves in the shoes of the people that are living in the Holy Land and what they're experiencing right now. So thank you for that. I will share right now my screen really quickly to let you know about the different events that are coming up with the Charter for Compassion. So tonight we have a special premiere screening of the Ubuntu Film Fest, of the film that the Charter for Compassion has been helping and sponsoring. There is the link right here on the chat that I can show you. But this is going to be on Bainbridge Island today or tonight. Tomorrow there is another one in Vancouver, British Columbia, in Canada. And again, in the link, you can look at all the other screenings. On Saturday, we have another global read. This is especially for kids and company. This is Choosing Love, A Pathway to Flourishing by Scarlett Lewis and Maureen Lewis. This is inspired by the story of Scarlett Lewis and her child that was killed in the Sandy Hook shooting, like school shooting that happened years ago. And that will be a really good conversation. And that's going to be moderated by Catherine Gotsky, who's the facilitator there. And then a global read on August 14th, we have Nurturing Healing Love, also with Scarlett Lewis, another book that she's presenting. And this will be a conversation moderated by another one of our board trustees, Garth Jameson. And we have an EdNet forum. This is for educational purposes. The Act of Peace Building with Bob, I don't even know how to say it, Schlehuber of Peace Building Connections. And the registrations are open. That's on Thursday, August 15th. And last but not least, we have our Charter Sangha, a place for meditation, for connection, for community that we present and provide every last Saturday of the month. In this case, it will be August 31st at 9 a.m. Pacific time. And we have a very special global read on September with Parker J. Palmer in the book Healing the Heart of Democracy, which will be a great conversation that will be moderated by Rabbi Ariel Berger. I think with that, my dear friends, again, thank you all for joining us. This has been a great conversation. The recording will be available on our YouTube channel later on. And everybody that has signed up for this global read, attended or not, will receive that link for later on to watch. Again, thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll be seeing you in our next global read on Saturday. Thank you.
Thanks, Charter for Compassion.
Thank you very much for me.